or use the yellow raise hand function. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and or to grab the attention of the chair or democratic officer. If you have difficulty hearing or being heard when you're addressing the committee, then let the chair or democratic officer know. If you have a webcam, then try turning this off, as this will help with broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth, so you can at least hear and be heard. So good to see everyone again. We'll get straight into it. Agenda item 1, any apologies for absence?
Just to clarify, Chair, no apologies given before the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. I can't see any hands up. So we'll move on to agenda item 2, the minutes of the meeting held on 12th of October 2023. If there are any comments, thoughts on that. Great. So if I move those, if I could have a seconder to note.
I'll second.
Thank you very much. And also just to note, Councillor Payne's apology should have been included in the September meeting, so that has been rectified. Just that for noting. Agenda item 3, to receive declarations of interest and the nature of such interests under the Council's Code of Conduct. Councillor Goodjohn.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare a prejudicial interest on item number 5. I'm an elective home educator, and I'm entitled to access to elective home education grants to support my children's education.
Thank you, Emma. Any other? Rhys Goodjohn.
Yep, I have a personal interest on agenda item 5, as I am home educated.
Thank you for that, Rhys. No other declarations of interest? We'll get into it. So it's the summary of Eston inspections outcome for summer 23 and updates on schools in statutory follow-up. Over to you, Caris.
Okay, diolch yn fawr, Chair. Noswaith dda bawb. There's 2 parts to this paper, as you can see. The first part is a summary of inspection outcomes for the summer term, and then we will have an update as well on the 2 schools that we have in the Vale of Glamorgan that are in statutory follow-up. So those are the 2 schools in special measures, Pencoetra and Penargarth. So I'll make a start just by looking at the outcomes from the summer inspections that were held. 3 schools were inspected during the summer term, a Bontfine Primary, St Joseph's Roman Catholic Primary School and Albert Primary. There's a summary in Appendix 1 of the findings in terms of any recommendations, and you'll also see in terms of Appendix 2 a list of all the schools that have been inspected since Eston restarted inspections in March 2022 following COVID. In terms of inspections, in terms of the 3 schools, there isn't any follow-up for the 3 schools that were inspected in the summer term. And Eston identify sometimes interesting or innovative practice, and they would write and ask schools to write a case study, which will be published by Eston. And in terms of the schools that were inspected in the summer term, 1 school has been invited to draft a case study in relation to their work in developing creativity through its curriculum, and that's for a Bontfine Primary. So that case study hasn't been published as yet, but it will become published in due course. And you have got in Appendix 3 a list of all the appendices, and sorry, in Appendix 3 a list of all the case studies that have already been published for Vale schools going back to March 2022. So in terms of the second part of the paper, really, it's about looking at the progress of the 2 schools that are in special measures in the local authority. And as I mentioned, they're Penargarth and Pencoetra High. They were both inspected in the autumn term last year. So following their inspection, there's been a post-inspection action plan to address the Eston recommendations. So schools have drafted those, and those have been approved by Eston. The local authority has also prepared a statement of action, and that outlines the support that both schools will be receiving from the local authority and also from Central South Consortium. And in terms of both schools, progress is monitored on a termly basis by Estyn, but also on the local authority level and regional level from the consortium, progress is monitored on a half-termly basis. So every half term, there's a meeting held in the schools where there's representatives from the schools, local authority, the consortium, discussing progress, what has been made and what are the next steps. And then for Pecoitra, because it is a secondary school in special measures, there's also a multi-agency panel that's been established there, and Estyn attend those meetings on a half-termly basis as well. And just to provide you in terms of the feedback that we have in terms of the monitoring visits that have been undertaken, Estyn visited Pecoitra in July. They focused on 2 recommendations. The first recommendation in relation to leadership and self-evaluation and improvement planning, and the 4th recommendation in terms of additional learning needs and the provision available for pupils and providing additional support for pupils. Estyn, when they do undertake monitoring visits, focus only on 2 or 3 recommendations at the time. They wouldn't look at this visit at the whole range of recommendations. So those are the 2 recommendations in Pecoitra. In terms of the visit, Estyn did recognise a number of positives in terms of the work of the interim executive head teacher and the appointments and the secondments made to strengthen the senior leadership team. As a result, they felt that the responsibilities of the senior leadership team are now more clearly defined. They're also working closely and more purposely linked to the priorities in the school development plan. There was a recognition as well of the work that the local authority has done in appointing 2 additional governors through their statutory powers, and there's also now a regional lead for governance working alongside the governing body, and that is supporting the governing body to be more challenging and to be undertaking more of a critical friend role. And then in terms of the appointment process, I'm sure possibly you are aware, but the head teacher post is currently out for advert, and we are hoping that there will be an appointment process and a head teacher appointed at the beginning of December. In terms of additional learning needs, again, there was a reference to the significant change in staffing here and the restructure of the work to strengthen ALN. So there's been a secondment to the school of an assistant head teacher to act as a deputy in a temporary capacity and to strengthen ALN and inclusion provision in the school. And all members now, the senior leadership team, are linked to year groups and have oversight and responsibility for ALN within their particular year group. Now, this is very much a new structure, so it's too early to monitor impact, but there was a recognition by Estyn in a sense that the school is trying to address the challenge and the number of ALN pupils, the very high number of ALN pupils that they have in the school. There was also recognition by Estyn that the processes to monitor attendance at the school were beginning to be more strategic, but there was a recognition as well that this, again, it's very early in terms of time and possibly too early to monitor impact. And there was, there's a recognition as well that attendance is still a significant concern for the school. The report in 2.27 references that Estyn will visit again in 4 to 6 months. We have been notified this week that Estyn will be visiting the school at the end of November. So there will be another monitoring visit for the school at the end of November, and they will be focusing in this visit on teaching and learning and the impact of skills and on pupils' development. Then in terms of Penargarth, when this report was drafted and ready to be presented, we knew that their first monitoring visit will be held in October. Obviously, since the publication of the paper, the visit has been undertaken by Estyn. And in terms of Pen y Garth, they were looking again at two priorities, two recommendations. The first one in terms of strengthening leadership, and the second recommendation was focusing on providing stimulating learning activities, particularly to support older pupils to develop and apply their skills over time. In terms of Estyn visit and in terms of the Pen y Garth, there was a recognition of the significant change in school leadership at the school. There's a new head teacher in place, a new Key Stage 2 lead, and that new Key Stage 2 lead has been appointed deputy in September. And there's also a new additional learning needs coordinator. So there's a recognition of the significant change in leadership at the school, but also recognition that people need time to, you know, to embed and to actually have an impact in their role. There was also, in terms of leadership, a recognition of a clear and purposeful vision, and the fact that there's a more robust self-evaluation processes now in place, and as a result leaders have increasing first-hand evidence to support standards and provision, and also have a clear picture of strengths and areas for development. There's also a recognition of the focus on teaching and learning as part of the professional learning programme for schools, and the fact that pupil and staff voice are a part of that process. And again, you know, there was a recognition about the number of creative activities and the, you know, the opportunities for pupils to work with external agencies. But there was a recognition again that there remains variation in the quality of teaching and learning, and as a school acknowledges, this is an ongoing area for the school to focus on moving forwards. So that's it in terms of the two schools in special measures. Also in 2.34, I've referenced Llanfair Primary. They're not in statutory follow-up, but they are in Estyn review, and Estyn will be reviewing their progress around 12 to 18 months after the publication of their report. So we don't have a date for that at the moment. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you for the update, Carys. So to councillors now, Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. Diolch, Carys. Mine was kind of right back to the beginning, looking at St Joseph's. One of the recommendations, recommendation 3, was to improve handwriting skills. And I was just really interested in terms of my education as a child, and, you know, the handwriting lessons we had. And now I'm kind of guessing there's been a decline across the board in that area. So was it something specific that was just picked up at St Joseph's, or is this across the board?
I think a number of schools would say that COVID has impacted on the handwriting skills of pupils, because if you think, especially if you think about some of the younger children during, you know, so if you go back at 2 or 3 years, you know, if you think about the pupils not having access to nursery and reception, and the work that's done there to if you think about the fine motor skills, so obviously there's a bit of catching up to do with developing those skills, because, you know, those are key things to develop before you even actually, you know, the marking and the whole, you know, before you even actually hold a pen. So that's something that's a number of schools are trying to address with time at the moment. Some are turning to intervention programs. You know, there's something like handwriting motorway, for example, that's been used in a few schools in the Vale. So, you know, so it's using programs like this, and possibly going back to looking at ensuring consistency in practices across the school as well. But certainly, you know, the online lessons and the fact that pupils, some of the younger pupils, didn't have access or didn't have the opportunity to develop those fine motor skills, have played their part here.
Okay, so is it something that the consortium is looking at, or is it just, like I said, is it specific schools
There is a programme as part of the foundation learning in
Yeah.
terms of looking at developing in a sense through play and sort of those developing those fine motor skills. So that is something that's being addressed as part of the provision and as part of the professional learning.
Okay, thank you. Diolch, Carys.
Thank you, Councillor Marshalsea.
Thanks, Rhys. Thank you, Carys. Congratulations to all those schools who've had really successful lessons this term. I just wanted to ask a few questions about Pencoetri. Is it possible for us to see the Pencoetri post-inspection action plan? And I've also got a few questions about the appointment of the new heads, because obviously we need a really experienced head teacher going into Pencoetri. And I was just wondering what the package that comes as part of that appointment is. And is it any different to try and encourage some really experienced head teachers to a difficult school?
Right. The advert is out, and you will see in terms of the job specification that it's very clear that they are asking for an experienced head teacher, but also someone who's had experience of leading and managing significant change in a school. So that's, sort of, there's a recognition in terms of the level and the skill needed for that post, and that's very clearly a part of the essential criteria on the job specification. In terms of the post-inspection action plan, I can make inquiries to see whether that can be shared, Councillor Marshalsea, and I will follow that up, sort of to see what's available and what I can share.
Thank you. And regarding the sort of job advert, is anything being offered sort of in addition, like financially, and any sort of anything within that package to entice people to the role?
There is. I'll get the advert up now, and I'll be able to quote directly. If you just bear with me.
Or at a later date is fine, Carys.
It is being advertised, if you want to see, on eTeach.
Okay, great.
So, and that's something that everybody would have access to.
No problem, I can have a look.
Right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
If you do have any problems, please contact me, and
Will do.
I'll be able to point you in the right direction in terms of the link.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Penn.
Mute. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Carys. Well done to Albert Rhodes, where I'm a governor. They had a decent report, and Landoc, they've made some really good progress. It was just a question on Appendix 1, page 1, the inspection feedback on Ibon Vines Primary, where they improve the one point they had was improve arrangements to promote healthy eating and drinking. What has any action happened since June to improve this? We all know how nutrition and having a full belly affects learning with the kids, with children in school. It really makes a massive difference with performance outcomes and concentration. The work that Cadixton's achieved in improving nutrition and working with parents to improve all those aspects is absolutely brilliant. And I think that all of the members of this scrutiny should be able to hear the stellar work that they've achieved. Could the work that they've achieved be rolled out to other schools that could possibly use the same kind of help? Are these arrangements already happening? If not, could we have a report back on how the work that Cadixton has implemented be rolled out to other schools to make a difference there? Does that make sense?
Can I answer your question first of all, Councillor Penn, in relation to, if that's okay, Chair, in relation to the Bontvine question first of all. In terms of, it's an Estyn recommendation for the school, and obviously the report was published during the summer holidays. So this recommendation would form part then, the school would have to form a post-inspection action plan, and this recommendation would be part of their school development plan moving forwards. And obviously they need time to actually address that recommendation. This is a slightly different scenario to what you're referring to in terms of Cardigston. This is a situation where pupils were eating crisps at break time. So there is this in the school, they do a lot in terms of promoting healthy eating. If you visited the school, or if you see on their X account or any of their social media, you'll see that they are growing plants and vegetables, and that, you know, that's work that, you know, they've got a lot of outside area. So they've got something like pizza oven outside, and they do a lot to promote food and healthy eating. It's just that this was a reference specifically to eating crisps, and you will see in the report that it's a reference, even though pupils have a strong understanding about healthy eating, they don't necessarily always make the right decision break time, but it's also coming under a reference in terms of leadership in the report, because obviously it's a governor, as you're aware, being a governor in Llandoch and Albert, it is a governor responsibility in terms of promoting healthy eating. So it's a slightly different situation to what you were talking about Cardigston. Okay. In terms of Cardigston, in terms of their big box buoy, for example, that's something that is being rolled out by Welsh Government, yes, in the Vale, but also further afield across Wales. So there's a significant number of box buoys available now, and that model is also being replicated in a slightly different way by a number of schools as well. Do you know what I mean? But Janet Hayward, the executive head of Cardigston and Oakfield, is working closely with Welsh Government and with the schools that are, you know, sort of that have access to a box buoy and have developed their own box buoy, and they have hosted several open days, and possibly some of people on screen have attended those open days, you know, to see, you know, and meet the pupils, see the, you know, sort of the pupils preparing food and cooking the food with the chef in the school, and then having an opportunity to actually even taste the food. So, you know, if you do have an opportunity to attend any of those open days, I would really recommend them. You know, it's great to speak to the pupils and to speak to the staff about their work there.
Yeah, it was just trying to work the two in. I appreciate, since coming back in September, it's possibly a little bit too soon to see if there have been any improvements in the arrangements put into place by Bontvine. I just thought the two quite nicely meshed together. And I know, Chair, I have emailed you a few times about the work they're doing coming to Scrutiny. I really think that all members, there are only a few there, should hear firsthand of what they're doing and the improvements that it's making to the lives of many, many children. Thank you, and thank you for letting me shoehorn that in.
Thank you very much. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. Diolch, Carys, eto. I should have asked this last time, but it's about attendance at Pencoitry High. Yeah. I just wondered about what's the current situation.
Right, if you just bear with me, in terms of the current attendance, the figures I've got between September and the 18th of October, it was around 73%.
So that's gone up. The attendance has improved slightly.
It's difficult to say. September compared to and I'm aware that Susan's on the call, so she might Susan Cow, so she might have some more up-to-date information than I have. But sort of when we were looking September compared to September last year, yeah, they were slightly down, if I remember, but certainly in terms of the attendance figures that we've got up until 18th of October, it was 73.47%.
I think that's a slight improvement.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Caris.
Thank you. I saw Martin Dacey had his hand up. I don't know if you still want to come in, Martin.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got some information about attendance coming through anyway to the group, but ultimately it's a slight improvement, talking about an improvement on the cumulative year to date for last year, but obviously it's just worth noting that it's only 2 months worth of attendance data so far, so early in the year, so it's difficult to make a comparison to last year at this point. I think it's fair to say, Councillor Payne, there's an awful lot of work to do there around pupil engagement and attendance, and it remains a high priority for us.
But sorry, Martin, hopefully it's on an upward trend, because that's kind of the way it's looking for me. Remaining positive.
Well, yeah, it's comparable certainly to last year. I think it's fair to say we aspire for it to be higher. Is a fair statement to make at this point, and we're working closely with them around it.
Thanks, Martin. I assume it's a legacy hand, Elliot. In that case, I'll go to Councillor Goodrum.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Caris. I was just wondering if Penquattery is at capacity at the moment. Is it full?
My understanding is that several year groups are full, yes.
That's also my understanding as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other comments or queries from councillors? No. Thank you for the presentation, Caris. Much appreciated as always. So I move that we note the recommendations, which include saying well done to the 3 schools for their inspection results. So if anyone would like to second that.
I'll second.
Thank you very much, Emma and Andrew. So move on to agenda item 5, which is the elective home education update, and it's over to Susan.
Hi everyone, sorry, I'll just put my camera on. Can you hear me okay? Thank you. Okay, if I just share my screen with you. Because I've just got a presentation that goes alongside the report. Okay, can I just check, Chair, can you see that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful, thank you. There you go. Okay, so yeah, just put together a short presentation just to go through some of the, I suppose, the key aspects of the report, and then obviously hopefully that'll generate some questions and discussion afterwards. So in terms of elective home education, as you know, it's the term used to describe the education provided by parents or carers at home rather than providing education for their children within a school setting. And the main focus of the work as a local authority is to work with families to ensure a suitable education which relates to the child's age, ability, aptitude, and their additional learning needs is being provided by them. So a lot of our work is identifying the young people that are electively home educated, and then supporting the families and the parents with that provision and ensuring that that suitable education is provided. In terms of identification of those children and young people, they may come to our attention through children who have been at school and have deregistered. We also have families coming forward and contacting us in order to engage with the support that the local authority offer if their children have not been in school previously, or if they've moved into the area but are EHE create an EHE provision. So that's kind of like a basic overview. In terms of what's happened in terms of the trend, this is just an overview of the last 5 years or so. And as you can see, the numbers have increased. They were increasing before the pandemic, but then have continued to increase quite a rate. So when you're looking at that, looking at 46 families were known to the local authority going back in 2018, and then at January 2023, which is when the PLASC data goes in, it was 166 last year. Now, obviously, that could be because more people are choosing to home educate, or it could be more people are now aware of the support with the local authority and so on, and therefore are reaching out as well. So there's probably a mix of factors that helps us to explain that trend. But, across the country, there has been an increase statistically, similar trends in other local authorities. So, and especially since COVID, there has been that increase. In terms of since September, because it's an ever-changing picture, so since the summer and September, just going through September now, the first half term, we've had 15 new EHE families learners that have kind of come into contact with the local authority and are working with us. 3 of those have moved into the area from other local authorities, but we've also had 8 learners that since July into September this year have returned to school. And we also have 9 learners that are currently waiting for school places. So there is a lot of movement back and forth with, if you like, with the cohort, with the numbers. In terms of the funding offer, already we have 126 learners out of, I believe, 168 at the moment, at this moment in time, that are also accessing some of the provision that's on offer, which we use the funding to provide. So that's 75% of the learners. In terms of the reasons for EHE, and this is something that I think we're now getting better at recording and opening up conversations than maybe was the case going back a few years. But I think a lot of people are interested in this, what is the reasons behind? And what's interesting, that in recent years, we've only had 8% of the current cohort say that, aspects of COVID and the pandemic was a trigger for maybe considering EHE. The main reason still remains as that kind of philosophical, ideological, lifestyle reasons behind choosing EHE. We've still got a kind of legacy there of 17% where maybe the reason isn't clear. And like I said, we're improving our kind of dialogue and collection of data so that we can have an overview. But you can see anxiety and school phobia, which potentially could have been amplified by the pandemic, is 11%. So you could argue that potentially is the legacy from the pandemic there as well. 8% of unresolved bullying or perceived bullying around that area. There are then, as you can see, kind of smaller percentages, but quite an interesting range for some families and some young people that has led to the decision for EHE. So either awaiting a school place of their choice, or when there's been relationship breakdowns with school, and so on. So that kind of gives you a bit of a flavour with some of the, I suppose, the reasons behind the decision by families and young people to electively home educate. In terms of our contact, and if you like, the sort of monitoring, visiting, linking up with families, at the end of last year, as you can see, the end of January 22-23, there was a very, quite high percentage there of about 84% if you combine home visits and contact with video phone call as that direct kind of working alongside families. if you look at where we are at the moment, those figures are lower, but they're on track to match last year's, if not go beyond, and hopefully those home visits will go beyond, because a lot of the visits are not due until January. So this is like an ongoing piece of work. So it'll probably be, you know, this time next year, then we can compare, you know, this January to last January to see how we've improved. But there's, you know, generally there is an increased number of EH learners, but there's also an increased number of home visits, contact, and kind of regular contact as well, because it's not just the formal home visits and video contact and so on and reports that are created. It's the more ongoing contact through newsletters, through you know, families phone in, checking things, and also during some of the events like Beach Academy and Forest Schools, where staff from the inclusion team go along to those events, and that becomes a more informal way of making contact. And I know from talking to the officers that go out to those events, you know, they've actually ended up reaching out to more families and making contact with more families, because maybe it is a bit more informal, and takes away maybe the potential fear or stigma that maybe some families might have about reaching out to the local authority and working alongside with members of our team. So that's been positive. Oh, sorry. There we go. Yeah. So in terms of you know, there's been a lot of improvement in how we run the EHE system. So in terms, we've got a very detailed tracker that helps us keep track on when we're making contact, what families have asked for, and so on. We've improved how we kind of formalise that recording and reports, and giving feedback to parents. Like I said, we've got the termly newsletters that are sent out as a way of signposting other services and making sure EHE families and learners have access to a lot of the information that other learners may be getting through school. We're doing a lot of close work with the additional learning needs team within the local authority, where we're working side by side to support families with IDPs and the reviews of those IDPs of EHE students who have additional learning needs. You know, we're keeping in contact not only with the All Wales meetings, working with colleagues from other local authorities to improve what we're offering, but also having regional meetings, sort of smaller offshoots of those meetings, and also, you know, maintaining our links as far as safeguarding and children's services and health where it's appropriate, and other teams within health. So, you know, it's over the years, you know, I mean, my experience is only since April, but talking to my colleagues and looking at everything that's been done, it certainly is evolving, it certainly is developing, and obviously there's always improvement. But I think the relationship that our EHE officers have is largely positive, you know, and sometimes it may not be fully positive because young people and families may be quite worried about the local authority getting involved, but we're working towards always reducing those stigmas, having an openness so that people could come forward in order to access the support. So the package, as you can see, you know, over the years, that's the kind of development of trying to increase the amount of families that take up the offer. So this could be online materials, use of laptops, like I say, having events which have that social aspect, going out to Beach Academy, Forest Schools and so on. So, you know, April 2022 there was a 61% uptake, and that looks like we're already on track for that to be increased this year, which is really positive. And I think that came from a survey that went out, so we're really open to letting the families lead some of that as well and have an input into what we offer in terms of how we're using the funding and what we're offering families and young people. So as you can see, you know, the 2020 offer compared to the 23, it's grown. we're trying to get that more holistic range of not only academic but social and emotional well-being and wider experiences on the offer, which seems to have been, from the survey, seems to be well received by the families and young people and learners. And really, there's, like I said earlier, there's been a lot of progress with how we've really put a lot of energy into trying to build positive relationships, making sure that we're giving plenty of training and support and advice to schools, because sometimes, looking at that reason about breakdown in relationships that may trigger a decision to EHE rather than that philosophical ideological reason for EHE. So we're trying to work with schools and work with families to really explore under those circumstances what EHE actually consists of and whether it is a really well-informed decision for that family and that learner and so on. And obviously we want to continue to improve that. That's some of our targets for this coming year now, to increase the percentage of home visits and contact that we have, continue to develop those positive relationships, develop the package of support, have more families and young people taking up those offers, and carry on developing with other teams like ALN, and making sure things like updating our website so people have access to all the information they need, especially if they're considering EHE, and like I said, making sure it's a real, really informed decision. So I think that gives a bit of an overview. I hope that's helpful, and then if you have any questions, that's what, I'm happy to do my best to answer.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Yeah, I know Councillor Goodjohn, due to interest, will have to depart, but if there's any comments you'd like to make, Emma, before leaving, then feel free to.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There is some comments I'd like to leave. I am a home educator of 19 years. The reason why I took my first son out of school was because the school couldn't meet his needs, and it was a school failing. That wasn't in the Vale, that was in England. I'd like to put across the feeling of home educators, because I am involved in a lot of groups. I started a group when I was over in Cambridgeshire, and I know now, being involved with the groups here, that parents are worried. They've got a fear and a worry about basically how they satisfy the LA. And they often think that they need more proof than is necessary for the education that they are providing their children. Especially with the Welsh Government's, new legislation, parents are worried about the language used in that, and that they feel they have a lack of understanding of home educating families and how they provide their education with different techniques. So I was wondering if there's anything that you could do to help alleviate that fear and maybe give them a bit more information on how they can satisfy the LA, which I think would put their minds at ease and improve their well-being. There's also, I was I'd like to say how happy I am with the Vale, because I get a lot of feedback about other authorities, and I hear some proper scare stories. The people are really unhappy with the way they're being approached. In the Vale, it does feel like it's a very supportive approach. And when I first moved here, I must admit I was so happy with the support I got. My oldest was too old by then. I'd already had to find an exam centre for him in Penarth. On my own back, because he was 1 year out. He was held back because of COVID for his exams, and he was 1 year back. So I had to do that. He had no funding, because that's another thing, is between the years you don't get any funding past the first year of exams. So I was wondering if there could be more support really around the exams of children past further than English and maths, because we got a lot of support with English and maths. And you must see, my youngest has got B's, absolutely wonderful support there. But we find it difficult now with him sitting further exams past that. He took his exams early. He took them a year and a half early for his numeracy and maths, and then a year early for his English, and now we're going on for further subjects, and I don't feel the support so much is there. We need more financial support. I think the support I've been offered is £100, and that's for 4 exams, and it doesn't really cover the exams. Also help with finding exam centres. I was pointed towards the Cube in Caerphilly, and basically their answer to me when we contacted them was they didn't even know if they'd taken external candidates, and they didn't get back to us. So basically, luckily for my oldest son, we found Infinity Teaching in Penarth, who we're going back to now. But we need more support in finding exam centres, and affordable ones, because you could go to a private school, but then you could end up paying thousands and thousands of pounds, which isn't accessible for families on low incomes, which stops them from being able to provide that for their children. And really, when you look at the amount of spent on a school child, is it? I'd like to just confirm with you, is that £7,000 a year for a child in education at a school? And I was wondering how that relates to home ed. Whether we could have more support in that way, because really we're alleviating the pressure on schools by home educating. And as you said, Pencoetry is at capacity. From what I know, Whitmore is at capacity. With the home educators, we're actually providing, we're helping. But I've got to say, I'm really, really happy with the Vale, with what you're doing, and I feel privileged to have had that support from you. But it would be nice to put the parents at ease with what they're supposed to provide, and with more help and support with exams further than English and maths. Thank you. So a bit of one there.
That's great. Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. I feel I could have, it would be lovely to have more time with you to talk about your experience, but thank you for the feedback of the Vale, because I'll share that with the team. I think some of the points you raised, though, absolutely. I think there is that worry. I went to one of the parent forums with Welsh Government just as an observer with the new guidance, and I felt from other local authorities there was that fear and stigma and worry about what could happen if things weren't satisfied, in terms of what's deemed as a suitable education. So I think that's a really important point of how we can work with families to kind of illustrate that and give some guidance on that. What you said about exam centres as well, I know Steph, who's we've got 2 colleagues with a particular focus on EHE that oversee and support the families and oversee the various processes around EHE, and they've got some really good contacts, and I know they've been working just in the last month with colleagues from Cardiff and Bridgend and various others to identify centres that, like you said, are affordable, and also working with some of our schools to see if they can be used as an exam centre, but payment to the school, that kind of way around things as well. So there's things sort of happening in the background. But I've also got I'm going to the EHE forum next week for the whole of Wales. So it'd be interesting that some of the points you've raised there, I'll keep those in mind and just see, get a feel for however local authorities are doing in with both points you raised with the exam centres, and also that clarity of how we can put people's minds at ease, because the last thing we want is not people to start a relationship with us in fear. It's got to be that open dialogue, isn't it, where there's trust and there's support. So yeah, but that's really interesting. Thank you.
Martin, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think Susan summed it up really well. I mean, the only comment I was going to make, just reflecting upon the really positive comments that Councillor Goodjohn has made, is the data, in the sense that I think I'm quoting directly there from the figures that were put up. There's been a doubling of the number of EHE learners, or more than a doubling of the number of EHE learners in the 4 years that I've been involved in the local authority. But it'll surprise nobody on the call to hear there hasn't been a doubling of the resource and a doubling of the finance for us to be able to go out and engage with the families in the way that we would like. There's not been anywhere near a doubling of the resource or the finance for visits and for ensuring that the families are signposted to really critical support, such as access to exam centres, access to things like laptops and distance learning tools, which I know some of our families really rely on. So, you know, it is just to state probably what everybody already knows. It's a really tight resource, and you know, I can promise Councillor Goodjohn and every other electively home educating parent in the Vale that every penny that we get from the Welsh Government to pass on to families, we make sure we do that. But I think clearly there needs to be ongoing dialogue at all levels really about this, because the numbers are increasing. And quite clearly, you know, Councillor Goodjohn's articulated, I think, very clearly that the families do require support in different ways. And, you know, the last thing to say on this, really, from my point of view, is it's a very varied group as well. We have very young children who are electively home educated, you know, nursery age type level, who have one set of requirements, obviously, that are very different from the set of requirements that Councillor Goodjohn's outlined in terms of her older children. So it's our colleagues such as Steph have to be very flexible in terms of their approach, because one minute they can be dealing with, you know, 5 and 6 year old children, and the next time they're filled in and trying to support families with queries around access to GCSEs, and all of it absolutely understandably so. It takes time and energy and resource. So we're just trying to maximise our time really with each of the families, but sadly, in honesty, it's not nearly enough. We could do with far greater amounts of time to unpick all of the various needs that our families have.
Thank you, Martin. I really appreciate that. And I must say, I did start with very young children in the home education journey. I've gone all the way through, and but it does seem that, you know, they need these exams to progress into work and beyond. So I'm not taking away from the younger families, that's very important, but home educators have been providing that for a long time for themselves, in groups themselves as well. But it's great you're supporting all the way through. But it is critical as well that they get these exams to be able to progress into further education and employment. But thank you, and I'm happy to work with you however I can. I am on all the groups of the home educators, and I have got lots of links in the home educating community. So if ever you need any help, I'm quite happy to support you with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll leave the meeting now.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks for those comments, and we'll let you depart the meeting. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Suzanne. I found the information you present really easy to understand as well, so well done on that. I'm a simple person. So there were two things I wanted to pick apart kind of as well. Is a 17%. I did ask this question a few meetings ago of Martin, and he gave me a really succinct answer and a good answer as well. But I just wanted to follow it up, and it's about the 17% missing. So are these not known missing, or is it missing young people, children and young people in terms of home education? Are they just not willing to engage with the local authority and we know about them?
Yeah, it's the known group that then we're reaching out to, but we're at different stages. And like I said, it kind of, you know, even today I had 2 conversations with Steph about families that we thought were not going to engage, but after a couple of phone calls, you know, a letter through the door, then there was engagement. And actually once that engagement happened, and I suppose going back to previous comments about people feeling supported and not judged, and, you know, and getting a more balance in that relationship, actually a lot of information then came through, and suddenly it was, oh right, we actually, that education that's been provided looks wonderful and it's fine, and we'll see you again now later on, but you know where we are if you need us. And so it's about building those relationships. So it's a continuous, I think for Steph and Charlotte, like I said, the two members of the team with the real focus, there's a lot of groundwork that is being done continually. And so that, you know, sometimes it's just harder to connect. But then what I can see is once that connection's made, and I think that has a lot to do with Steph and Charlotte's approach, and then it's maintained, and then we can build on it. But then of course, you know, it's like I said, it's an ever-changing landscape, because almost daily we'll have, you know, maybe new people on the books that we've got to start that process with again, you know, once we become aware. And sometimes it's, I suppose that's a difficulty as well, because sometimes parents reach out for information. At that point, then we become aware, if we weren't already, that they're home educating. And then you've got to kind of really work with that relationship, because sometimes I think, well, I only wanted information, and now suddenly I'm in this process that I don't understand. And again, we've got to spend time kind of easing people's fears and worries, and so that they can see, hopefully, the advantages of being in a relationship with us as well, and working with us in that way. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does.
It
does. Because there's missing that aren't accounted for, and there are missing that are known. So you know, it's quite important to have that distinction. The other thing was something that picked up on Councillor Goodjohn's point was about you know, the perception of the local authority, and perhaps, you know, unnecessary worry about what the relationship's going to be like when people elect and they inform the local authority. They get information on what, you know, what guidelines, expectations. Do they get information in a pack about, oh, you've decided to, you know, you've elected to home educate your child, this is what can happen, and this is what support is given? That's given over automatically, is it?
Yeah, so if it depends on the situation. Say if a young person and a family are currently at a school, and then they're considering elective home education, and that maybe they've sent in a deregistration form to the school let us know, we contact the family, and then we just go through it in a, as you know, hopefully, you know, we try to be very objective and say, here you go, you know, this is your experience in school, this will be your experience if you EHE, this is the support we can offer, this is what we're going to expect of you, you know, this is what we need to do in order to kind of make that judgment that the education is suitable, and then we go from there. And at that point, some of the families, after meeting the team and having that conversation, think, wow, that actually is a lot more than I thought, or maybe they may have had a different perception of what would be offered for elective home education, and may decide to rebuild things with the school and look at things differently. Other times it's like, yeah, that is what I thought, thank you very much, I want to move forward with it. So if it comes through that way, like I said, sometimes it's almost like almost a self-referral. So like with a couple of families that have recently moved into the local authority, they reached out to us and said, right, we're new, you know, we've moved, we would like your support. So it is slightly different, but like you said, yeah, it's all about giving the information. I suppose, you know, we're updating our website at the moment, so I think it's how we can maybe, before people reach out to us, they can maybe see the website and see, you know, a bit more detail maybe on, and how we can get that across about what that suitable education looks like, or what's expected. So, and we're reviewing our websites currently for, you know, to hopefully make them more accessible, and to give that information before they even get in touch with us, you know.
Thank you very much. And just one more point, because there was a few things picked up on, and following on from Martin's point about the pressures on staff and in terms of funding pressures, has there ever been a financial piece of work done on how much is spent on a home educated child? Because I know there are often things like swimming, you know, there are lots of kind of extracurricular things that would normally be part of school life that are offered as part of home education. So has there ever been something that picks apart how much a home educated child costs?
I haven't been involved in that directly, so maybe Martin might know. I don't know.
I think,
Yeah, I'm not aware, Councillor Payne, of a sort of comprehensive analysis as to the costs of electively home educating. Just to clarify, I presume you mean from the parents' point of view, like the kind of total cost of them undertaking different activities. Yeah,
both.
I think it probably
the cost to the local authority, you know, the cost to you know, education, books, things like that. I know, you know, they get £120 allowance and plus grants, But with the rise in home education and the increase in pressures, in the last meeting we looked at the funding formula, you know, this is an additional pressure on the local authority and an additional pressure on workers to deliver something and support those parents and those children and young people. So I would be really interested in terms of scrutiny to look at that as a piece of work to see what cost pressures there are,
Yeah.
and staff pressures too.
Yeah, it's definitely a good question you raise. I mean, it's easy enough to provide scrutiny with the data around the amount of money coming from Welsh Government that is cascaded through direct to the families in the way I've outlined. I think we probably have to do a bit of the GCSE maths there, Susan, around the amount of time we've got with officers and how it divides up. It's not going to be a huge amount when I don't know what was the figure there, 189 now. And we've got, 2 part-time officers to put into context, Councillor Payne. So it's not copious amounts of time.
No.
And that's why I said earlier that, in honesty, we could do with a lot more. But the way things are, the world as it is, the money we have is the money we have. So we're just trying to optimise it. The other thing
sorry,
as well.
Martin, just picking up on you, it's nearly quadrupled. I was looking at the home ed. If you look at the stats, it's nearly quadrupled. So if we've got the same pot of money, we've got more young people, we need to examine it. We need to scrutinise it a little bit more.
Yeah. No, absolutely. There is clear challenges there. The only other thing I would add my hand up for, just to reflect upon what you said there, Councillor Payne, was around this issue of children missing in education and those who haven't been seen as. I mean, it's just to clarify from. For Scrutiny's point of view, they are 2 distinct groups, and I think you've kind of captured that, Councillor Payne. But from our point of view, those who we know to be electively home educated but aren't engaging with us via the visits and the meetings being offered or providing us with a brief report on annual progress of the children, some of the stuff Councillor Goodjohn was on about, they are one distinct group, and there are measures we can take if we aren't. Basically, our duty is to ensure that these children and young people are receiving a suitable education. It's a very vague term, and we could probably spend the rest of the evening discussing what a suitable education is, right? But I mean, that is the duty as is outlined to us. So, those are the measures we take to try and fulfill the duty that is put upon us via home visits, preferably, because we'd rather see our young people and chat to our families and have a good relationship. But if they want to give us a report, that's fine as well. The 17% refers to the group of elective home educators who we know, who for whatever reason don't want to engage in a visit, virtual or otherwise. The other group I'm talking about, which is a very different group, is those who are children who are missing in education. Susan's team also monitor those, and we'd happily bring you a report to Scrutiny around that group. But it is a very different group, because to be clear, they are not families who have electively home educated. They are families who, for whatever reason, have children who are displaced from education. So I think it's very, very important, because sometimes the groups are conflated and it is tricky. But the other group, the children missing education group, to be clear, they're not EHE, even though they have many traits that are very, very similar to the EHE group, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pan.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Susan. The uptake, the increase in grants, does this reflect the growing pressures on households, or have other reasons been identified? Do you know?
Sorry, Councillor Penn, can you just repeat your question? Sorry.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Does the increase in grant uptake reflect the pressures on households, cost of living, inflation, etc., or have other reasons been identified?
It would be. I think we'd have to delve a bit deeper. From talking to the team, I think it's come as a result of the relationships that we've built and the reaching out to raise awareness of what's on offer, via the newsletters, via emails, via that face-to-face contact over the phone, and I just think building the relationships. I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting point, isn't it? Yeah, definitely. But I wouldn't know if it's, directly linked to any increase in, cost of living pressures. But that might be something that over time we might uncover a little bit more detail on. From what I can tell with the team and the work they're doing, a lot of it is because of the reaching out and connecting.
I think it's recognition, Councillor Penn, from Welsh Government that this group is a burgeoning group now. It's not the sort of handful of children it was in years gone by. It's a great, with a higher profile. And there was an issue a few years ago as well, which was quite prevalent in the media around the register being possibly put upon EHC families. They would have to register their children. It was an incredibly contentious period, so there was a lot of media attention on it then, and I think possibly part of the reaction, I don't know, because obviously I'm not in Welsh Government, but I think it was, there's this group now and there's a lot of eyes on it, and they clearly have pressures in the way that Councillor Payne kind of outlined earlier, or that there should be some recompense for that. To answer your question fully around, does it react directly and correlate with the cost of living crisis? I don't think that it couldn't, because it's not going up anything like the percentage points as I see the rate of inflation. So I think that's probably, as Susan says, something we're going to need to revisit with government's colleagues at governmental level, because quite clearly, I think Councillor Goodjohn articulated well, there are pressures now, aren't there, on these families, and their costs of electively home educating do not appear to be decreasing or even remaining the same. But the grant money, I'm not aware, I don't think Susan is, of any talk of the grant money rapidly increasing either. So there are inevitable pressures that will convey as a consequence to that, sadly.
Yeah, that's on one hand, that's good to know that it might not be having an effect, and actually your interactions with home learners is better, and there's more information available to elected home learners. Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Rhys Goodjohn.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make the point that the services that are provided in the EHE grant offer are really helpful to both parents and learners, because, for example, I used the YMCA English and Numeracy sessions for my GCSEs, and that helped take pressures off the parents at being the sole teachers of their children. It kind of helped the quality of education in a way, and I saw that the pupils around me, it really helped with their future prospects. So I just wanted to raise the point that it is really important that the Vale of Glamorgan Council keeps up this level of support, because of how much it affects people's lives.
Thank you, Rhys. And I really value that from yourself, having experienced what was on offer. So I really value that feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhys, and over to Councillor Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman. Interesting debate. The numbers, whilst they're growing, are still relatively small as a percentage of the children we seek to educate here in our county. I got a couple of questions, and then perhaps I'll be brave enough to make a point or two. Is there any, because the numbers are still relatively small, because we've only been tracking them in this depth for a relatively short period, I was just wondering, is there any signs, or even has there ever been any work done by anyone of a correlation between homeschooling and future being neat? Because we have reports on pupils, former pupils, whatever, through the system who have become neat. My other couple of points really is that we heard earlier that Pencoitra is on 73% attendance. So we have a chunk of pupils here who are not being homeschooled, and they're not being schooled either. So I think we need to put more of an emphasis, and I know there's schemes that we're trying to push through council and schools at the moment to try and do that, but that's possibly even more of a worry and a concern to me. But the thing that gets me tonight in this debate is that when parents actively elect to homeschool, and then we hear issues about these parents don't necessarily have the full range of skills, or the children don't necessarily have any support to go swimming or to the cinema or a trip or anything else that is perhaps taken more for granted within our school system. Well, they have elected to do this, and it's like penny and the bun, and I'm just confused where we're going with it. And I certainly don't want to come over as being negative or not saying that parents should opt out and opt into homeschooling, but it just concerns me where we're going with it, because I have to say that I believe that for the vast majority of children, education will be better within the LEA, within a school process, and within the whole scheme of education that we provide as a very good LEA. I'll throw that open. There may be more debate. Thank you.
I don't know if Susanna or Martin had any comments on that.
I'm happy. Do you want me to respond, Susan, or do you want to come in?
Yeah, that was okay. I was just going to say a little bit about the persistent absenteeism, because as you said, Councillor Hodges, about the concern about children who, although they're on roll in a school, you know, there may be a large period of their time when they're not in school, and that's something as a team is a real core focus for us and all the work that we're doing with schools, because obviously school in that sense, in many senses, is a protective factor, and whilst they're not at school, they're at risk in so many ways. So there's layers of work going on there, and I suppose that's in a way a separate compartment for our team in terms of the work we do, working with schools to improve and engage with those families and children that are not in school, compared to the work that we do with EHE families, which is a kind of separate side of what we do. And I suppose, you know, we could talk at length about what we're trying with persistent absenteeism and the work we're doing, and I suppose that's it needs a separate time really. But Martin, I don't know if you want to add.
I mean, the issue around persistent absenteeism is a real priority, and I was referring to that when I made reference to Pencoit earlier on, Councillor Hodges. I mean, the other thing I would add in terms of the resource that's being focused around those who are persistently absent from Pencoit, or indeed any other school, is that work operates outside of just the remit of Susan's team as well, although it is a core part of their function. So I know Liz is on the call. The educational psychologist, for example, and her remit do a lot of work around EBSA, emotionally based school avoidance. So what I'm saying is there isn't one part of the directorate that is focused in this area. There are a number of different teams who all have a kind of role to play within it. Going back to the issue that was raised around elective home education and the duty of, I can't think of another word, upon the parents themselves. Well, I you know, that's what I understood was being said earlier, was the very much I think EHE parents do recognise the fact that their responsibilities in this area, and I think and everybody's different. They're not one homogenous group, are they? Right? But when we speak to parents, I think probably some of the worries are that they're not doing a very good job, and that we or somebody will come and tell them that, and there will be huge implications for them. And in the overwhelming majority of instances, from what we can see, they are providing a suitable education, and they are effectively funding that by a reasonably small, in the grand scheme of things, reasonably small amount of grant money. So yes, we do want to provide the very, very best for the children in our schools. Of course we do, and we want them engaged. Hence there's all this focus around persistent absenteeism and getting children in and them experiencing the best. But we recognise equally that it is the right of people to electively home educate under UK law, and we have duties to undertake as part of our remit. And the best way, I think, to undertake those duties is to form positive relationships with those families. But I think that, in honesty, Councillor Hodges, with those who are CME, the children who are missing, I think that with regards to any other type of family or child who's moving in and out, if we don't try and promote positive relationships with those from more challenged or vulnerable groups, the whole thing becomes more difficult and more resource heavy for us. So that is why we're focused very much in the way that we are. We're recognising the rights of those who are in school and those who aren't, and doing our best with the resources we have at our disposal to progress things with them. And to me, whenever I speak to others across Wales, everybody's coming from that same mindset, I think, in this area.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you. I think along the lines of Councillor Hodges, the first point I'd like to make is that absenteeism from schools is nothing new. It's been going on for many years, many decades. When I was in school, it was problematic, and it's not an easy issue to solve, obviously, because it's still going on, and there's various reasons behind that. But I think when budgets are tight, which we're being told in all different areas, people are complaining about potholes and etc. When there's only so much money in a pot, it's difficult to be able to spread it everywhere, as much as you want. And the LEA, I think, in the main, provide a very good opportunity for educating children of all ages. And if people do want to choose to home educate, then I think there has to be a level of tolerance on how much support they can get from the local authority based on the amount of money availability there. I think the core area has got to be the schools within the area, so that's where the bulk of the budget has got to go for the majority of the children, because as someone else has picked up, the numbers home educating, if you do it as a percentage wise, it's relatively very small. So I think we need to be mindful of that. And I think as well, what's not been mentioned here is the amount of people are also choosing to put their children into public school education. Okay, it can be argued they can afford it, but I've got neighbours who I wouldn't class as very wealthy people, but because they couldn't get their daughter into the high school in the Vale they wanted, they chose to go the private education route. Now, they don't come knocking on the door of the local authority asking for financial support for that, they take it on the chin. So I just think we need to be mindful, but in tough times, every child's entitled to a good education. And the other one concern I would like to mention I do have for children being home educating is the interpersonal skills aspect. I think an important part of when I go back to when I was in school, it's not just the academic side of it, it's the sort of learning of disciplines, learning of respect for yourself, learning for respect for others. And I can remember teachers of mine when we went to a reunion 25 years after I left school, and I went to quite a problem school, Glenderrow, at the time it was a problem school, and they said to me at that reunion, not all children in Ely were academically brilliant, but there's over 500 people here tonight, and look around you. Look what we've achieved and managed to teach them, and that's respect for themselves and respect for others. And I wonder where the danger of home educating is, where the people will develop those necessary interpersonal skills to the same level. Thank you.
Susan, Martin, don't know if you had any thoughts or comments on that.
Oh, well, I'll come in, Susan. I know that there are a lot of sort of EHE families who are looking to engage with others. So there is opportunities for kind of socialisation. I think some of the activities that have been outlined earlier that a number of the families are engaged with sort of promote those sorts of skills and experiences. But as I said, there is no very clearly defined definition of a suitable education, and different interpretations of what that looks like. But I know that some of the families go to great lengths to ensure that their children do receive kind of quite comprehensive and well-rounded experiences. So it's as I said earlier, this is not a homogenous group, so it's very difficult to say this is what EHE parents, because they're all very, very different types of people, and I wouldn't want to do them the disservice of, badging them up as being one thing or something else.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments or queries from councillors? I think, Susan and Martin, there's some interesting things raised in that discussion. So maybe we can, Councillor Birch.
Thank you. I'd just like to confirm that actually a lot of the money that we allocate to these children who are being home educated, that we allocate to their families, actually comes from the Welsh Government. It doesn't come out of the Vale budget. So it's not a question of us depriving children in mainstream Vale funded schooling in order to prop up these home educating families. It is actually money that comes from Welsh Government that we wouldn't be getting even if these families weren't home educating. I'd just like to reassure people on that point.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Susan and Martin, if we could have a discussion outside this, I think there were important points made about children missing in education and persistent absenteeism. Maybe it'd be worth a report to the committee in at some point in the future, but maybe we can have a chat tomorrow and see what your workloads are like, and when we can maybe get a report and a presentation on that.
Yeah.
I think we've got a report coming through, Chair, in the summerish time, Susan and me, I think, on attendance, so we could cover off.
Yeah, we said another report on attendance within 6 months, so we could put a particular focus, a more time spent on the persistent absentee aspect of that, if that helps. But yeah, more than happy, obviously
Great.
To present something on CME as well. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Working hard. Thank you very much for that. We really appreciate the presentation. It was a good discussion. So in that case, then I move that we note the recommendation. So that includes an update on elective home education in 12 months' time. If anyone would like to second that.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of tonight's proceeding. So thanks everyone for participating, and I'll see you in December.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thanks.